أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We welcome you all to our long paused sessions on Islamic Financial Enlightenment Forum, where we discuss Islamic financial principles and operations, and when we enlighten the general public about the operations of Islamic finance. These sessions and this enlightenment program was officially launched November 2023, last year, where we have been able to facilitate many experts and scholars in the field of Islamic finance who have been able to educate us on the operations, principles, and some teachings that Islam has given us as regards Islamic finance. Our today's session is going to be the 13th series of this enlightenment discussion. And inshallah, we believe after today's session, we would have in the upcoming weeks and months, some other sessions that will be enlightening, as this is going to be enlightening. Today, inshallah, we are hosting our scholar, the person of Professor Abdul Razak Abdul Majid Alaru, who inshallah will join us very soon. Professor Abdul Razak Abdul Majid Alaru is someone that everyone should know. He is not an unknown person in the industry. He is one of the builders and founders of Islamic finance in Nigeria. When we see anything, any production and any development in Islamic finance in Nigeria, one of the names that rings bell in our minds is the name of Professor Abdul Razak Abdul Majid Alaro. Today, inshallah, is going to take us through basically AAOIFI standard 36, where discussion on impact on contingent incidents on financial obligations. So today, inshallah, we are going to have him on this standard, and among the highlights of his discussion, as has been widely circulated, is that he's going to take the AAOIFI standard number 36 as the original manual that is going to teach us through. And after this, there are many highlights that, inshallah, we are expecting him to touch while giving such discussions. So, inshallah, in a few minutes, we expect him to join us. And as soon as he joins, he will continue with us the discussion that is expected to last for at least an hour, while we open the floor for questions and other related discussions for 20 minutes and thereabouts. So as we await him, inshallah, we implore us to remain patient till Professor joins us in a short time. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, our Sheikh has just joined the call, and as he has joined, inshallah, we will start the discussion in the very short time. For those who are not aware, the Islamic Financial Enlightenment Forum was established November 2023, and up till now we have been able to facilitate about 12 enlightenment sessions where we have discussed different AAOIFI standards, and where we have been able to welcome different scholars and experts in the financial industry. And one of the behind the development of Islamic finance in Nigeria, and one of the internationally recognized scholars of Islamic finance. Law University of Ilorin, and we expect him, inshallah, today to take us through the topic impact of contingent incidents on financial commitments. Primarily, is going to take us through the summary of the AAOIFI standard number 36, and we expect him alongside to discuss some related issues that border on this topic, some of which are the rulings on contingent incidents that cause substantial increase or decrease in the value of a currency, rulings of contingent incidents that is caused by cancellation of a currency at the time of settling debt-related obligations, also whether debt obligations should be settled in a like sum or value equivalent in the occasion of substantial decrease of the value of the contractual currency. Also, we expect Sheikh to discuss alongside Sharia-compliant techniques that we can use to hedge against contingent future incidents in debt-based contractual obligations. Also, we also expect, along his discussion, to discuss Islamic perspective on time value of money and what Islam says about this concept. We would also want Sheikh, alongside his discussion, to discuss with us issue of factoring of inflation in repaying financial obligations or debts. And also, one of those things that we will expect to hear the Islamic view on while Sheikh is discussing this topic is to guide us on the loss of purchasing value of the currency and what is the Islamic solution to this economic problem. So we are welcoming our Sheikh in this gathering where we hope to benefit as regard the expected topics and highlighted discussions. مرحبا شيخنا جزاكم الله خيرا.
حياكم الله. الحمد لله وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. I ask him to send more peace and blessings on the seal of all prophets and the leader of all mankind, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. May the peace and blessings be extended to cover all members of his household, all of his companions, and whoever follows their footsteps until the day of resurrection. Let me also quickly appreciate the effort of our able and amiable brother, a very energetic and very promising scholar, particularly in the realm of Islamic financial contracts or financial transactions. I'm referring to no other person but the host of today's event, Dr. Habibullah Abiodun Juma. I know he has been doing a lot of things, a lot of effort he has been making to improve on the level of awareness, on the level of knowledge that people have in this particular part of the world relating to Islamic commercial practices. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you handsomely and abundantly, and to give you more strength, more resources to continue to do more for the benefit of the entire Muslim Ummah in Nigeria and even beyond. I equally welcome all the participants in today's seminar, which I'm highly delighted to be part of. And we are going to discuss a matter that I know is of great importance to all of us, whether we are in a particular business or we are not known for any particular trade or business. There is no way one can avoid having financial commitments towards one another. One way or the other, you will have a commitment financially that you are obliged to pay, or you are obliged to render a service for another party. And one of the factors that may influence your performance in this respect is the issue of fluctuation in the value or the prices of the currency of the subject matter, whether you are trading in Naira or in dollar or in pound sterling. There is a likelihood, there is every possibility that the prices will not be stagnant. You may have a price when the contract is being sold, when the two parties and that may be influenced, may be impacted either positively or negatively by the market rate of the currency that we are dealing with in such a contract. So this is why this particular topic, as I said, is of importance to all of us. As businessmen or even as non-businessmen, you will have something to offer, to do to another party as a commitment. By way of introduction, which a particular reference, according to the organizers, they would like me to make a particular reference to the Naira, dollar.
I think we just lost our sheikh on the call. Please, while we are waiting him, let's ensure to mute our as we go the class. Please try to mute your.
Dr. Habib.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
Can you hear me?
I hear you, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Have you been hearing me?
Sir. It started like in last 2 minutes.
Last 1 minute.
You were about to. Yes.
Because I think somebody muted me. I did not mute myself. So maybe you have to look into that one. Somebody must have muted me when I was speaking. So please, the host should please look into that one. Because I just discovered on my screen that I've been muted. So, but good enough, you said I was only muted for 1 minute. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Alhamdulillah. So, as I was saying, this element is key. The understanding of this element of the right to defer our obligation, either to pay an amount of money or to render a service to the other party. That right is what we call in Sharia al-ajalu. You know, in some contract, you have a duty to discharge. You have a duty to perform instantly. And in that one, the issue of having an obligation that may be impacted by either the rise or the fall in currency does not even arise. When we have contract that obligations are to be performed spontaneously, instantaneously, the two parties are to perform immediately, then there is no issue of even thinking of how the rise or fall of currency will impact our obligations. But this becomes noticeable when a party in the contract has something to perform, to deliver at a time to come, not instantly. And that is what as I said, is known in the Sharia terminology as haqqul ajal, the right of deferment by a party to the contract. Now, who owns these rights? Let's take, for example, a contract of debt, loan contract, for example. I'm giving you an amount of money, and the agreement is for you to pay back. Now we are in the month of July. Let's assume the contract stipulates that this money that I'm advancing to you is payable on the first day of December 2024. That is about 6 months or 5 months from today. Now, who owns that right between me? Let us assume that I'm the creditor, and the other party, Dr. Habib, just by way of giving example, is my debtor. I am giving him an amount of money payable in the next 5 months. Now, this right of deferment automatically comes in because I don't expect him instantly to repay a loan. A loan usually comes with a right of deferment by the debtor on the part of the debtor. Now, who owns this right? Because understanding this is important, will enhance our comprehension of the Sharia provisions that we shall be mentioning in relation to contingent incident vis-a-vis our financial commitment. The owner of the right of deferment is the debtor and not the creditor. What do I mean by that? Let's come back to the example that I've just given. I have advanced an amount of money as a loan to Dr. Habib. So I'm the creditor. He is the debtor. Now, the right of waiting to pay until December, as we have agreed, does not belong to me, as the creditor. He owns that right 100%. And as we all know, it's only who owns a right that can waive it. Now, relating that one to today's topic, it means whatever happens. For example, after sealing the contract, a contract that says the amount is payable in 5 months. But after a month, I discovered as the creditor that the value of the currency of our agreement has already started losing value. a naira, the purchasing power of naira is declining, is decreasing. When we take, for example, the currency exchange between dollar and naira, at a time when dollar was being exchanged for 800 naira, then all of a sudden, after a month into our contract, I realized that a dollar is being exchanged for 1,000 naira. That means there is a fall in the purchasing power of the currency of our agreement. Do I have a right of forcing Dr. Habib to pay now in order to avoid further decline in the value of the currency? The answer is no. Is no, and capital no. And the reason for that one is what I've just itemized, what I've just discussed, what I've just mentioned, that in Sharia, it is only the debtor, the party that has an obligation to pay, is the owner of the right of deferment. So in this issue that we are to discuss today, we must understand it quite all right, that under no circumstance can a creditor say, is it that you pay now, or if you don't pay now, it is going to increase because the value of that currency, the currency is losing its purchasing power. The reason why that cannot be done is what we have mentioned, that the right of ajal, the right of deferment in repayment actually belongs to the debtor or the party that has an obligation to pay. Meaning that it is up to Dr. Habib to decide whether he wants to pay now, at least to avoid further loss, further devaluation in the currency. And that will be okay, because whoever has a right equally has that right of waiving his or her right. In this regard, there is only one exception that the Muslim jurists will draw our attention to, because whatever Sharia says, Sharia will never accommodate any act of injustice to either parties to a contract. The only exception that is usually mentioned in this particular case of who owns the right to defer the discharge of obligation is when that will be to the disadvantage of the creditor. You have a right to defer, and he has agreed to that right for you to defer the payment and the discharge of your duty. And it is only you that can waive that right. But in waiving that right, it must never be at the detriment, at the disadvantage of the creditor. If it does, then even you as the owner of the right, you loses the right of waiving it. You can no more waive it. Let me cite one example that is usually mentioned in the fiqh literature. That, again, the two of us, myself and Dr. Habib, the creditor and the debtor, he has an obligation to pay. Then we embark on a journey after having concluded our contract of loan. Then all of a sudden, we are circled, may God forbid, or let's use other people, not me and Dr. Habib for this matter. They are encircled by a team of armed robbers. That is how it is stated in the fiqh literature. That now, Dr. Habib is having that same amount of money with him, but he didn't intend to pay me because the payment will actually mature in the next 4 or 5 months. Can he come forward to say now, Prof, you know, I own the right to defer till 4 months before I pay you. And I can also waive that right. So please take your 1 million naira or your 500,000 naira immediately now, because it is my right and can waive it. That will be to my detriment as the creditor, because we all know the result of that practice. It means the armed robber will cut away the amount of money, and he will have discharged his duty of paying my money, while there is no doubt that I am going to lose such an amount of money. So that will be an injustice to the creditor. And that is the only exception that is usually introduced when we discuss this issue of who owns the right of deferring an obligation that he or she has to perform or discharge as a duty. Now, if you have understood this well, it means it is only on the debtor to decide when to pay. But he loses that right whenever the date that you have agreed on, the settlement date of the obligation has come. then he has no more, he has lost that right of deferment. He has extinguished the right of deferment that he originally had. And that is what will now take us to the AAOIFI standard. AAOIFI standard number 36 is about the impact of contingent incident or financial commitment. It goes beyond even the contract of loan. Any commitment that you have. For example, you are a contractor and you have entered into a contract of building a classroom or a hall or even a factory for the other party. So that's a commitment that you must perform. You must discharge as a duty. And when you entered into such a contract, the exchange rate, just use Naira always for ease of understanding. Like what you are witnessing today, when you entered into this contract a year ago or more than that, the exchange rate was just 700 or 800 or thereabout. But today is about 1,500 Naira. So if you are to perform the contract today, that performance will be drastically different from what you voluntarily entered into. When you are entering into that contract, you had something in mind. At least when you enter into contract, you envisaged that all what I need to build the classroom, all what I need to build the hostel or whatever, will amount to 800,000 Naira. And I'm charging 1 million Naira with a profit margin of 200,000 Naira. But imagine if I'm to spend now 1,500, the same thing, because 800 was the equivalent of $1,000 then. And we all know, especially in this part of the world, that unfortunately, most of our materials in our local domestic market are valued based on the currency exchange. If the dollar rises, the marketers will also add to the sale price of their commodities and materials. So in this same example now, I will have to spend 1,000 or 1,500,000 Naira to build the same hostel. One, there is no amount of gain, no amount of profit will accrue to me from the contract. In addition to that, I will incur loss to the tune of 500,000 Naira, because the agreement was for him to pay me 1 million. Then I will have to look for 500,000 to pay. So this is exactly what is meant by a contingent incident. A contingent incident in Sharia is called al-arid. That is something that was never planned, was not in sight. It was unforeseen for the two parties. We need to make that one also very clear. Contingent incident that will impact your financial obligation in relation to what we are discussing and in relation to the AAOIFI standard that you're about to read to you does not mean what you intentionally planned to happen. It's something that is beyond the capacity of the two contracting parties. That is when we have al-arid or al-awarib or contingent incident. Now, according to AAOIFI standard, standard number 36, it says that these contingent incidents and the ways they can impact our financial commitments or obligations can be seen from two different perspectives. The first perspective is when the contract can still be performed, but we must introduce a substantial amendment to the terms of the contract. There's no total frustration of contract here. The contract is not being totally frustrated. That is, it is not impossible. When we talk about frustration in contract, frustration means either of these two things. Is either it becomes impossible for you. It is not even possible if you want to perform. It's not possible for you to perform. Like when you are asked to produce something that has already been declared illegal, you entered into a contract of supplying an object to a company. And before the date of supply, the law of the land made the import or even the production of such an item, made it an illegal practice. Then it becomes impossible for you from the law perspective, from the legal perspective. So either from the legal perspective, legally, or even physically, it may become impossible for you to perform, or even commercial. So in any event, when it becomes impossible for you to perform, that is the second type as identified by AAOIFI standard. The first type is what they say, their performance is still possible, but it will require that the terms of the contract to be substantially modified, to be substantially amended. You cannot proceed the way you have conceived the terms of your contract when you entered into it. That is the first one, as identified by AAOIFI standard number 36, and particularly under subsection 3 of that standard 36, that is why it is mentioned types of contingent incident. That contingent incident may be a one leading to amendment, modification of the terms of the contract. And they gave some examples that we may not have enough time to read through. But from what I've been given as examples, they are not too different from what is also given in the standard. But the other way, the other type mentioned or identified by AAOIFI standard of the contingent incident is the one that will make it totally impossible for you to perform. Let me read an example given by AAOIFI for ease of understanding here. For example, it says you have a conference is being organized, and you have been contracted as the party to supply the conference materials, bags, writing materials, ID cards for the participant. All conference materials were given to you. The contract of supplying them was given to you. But for one reason or the other, the conference will take place in September, for example. You are still expecting the delivery of the materials from your partner overseas. That is when you are importing, for example, or even when you are producing, you are expecting some raw materials for AU to be able to produce. So the production cannot even take place, or the importation cannot even materialize until October, and the conference will come up in September. So it's impossible for you to perform. It will even be unreasonable for you to perform when you are now supplying the materials of a contract of a conference that was held in September and supplying them in October. So that's a good example given by AAOIFI standard of the one of the two types of contingent incident that may impact financial commitment. Now, how can we resolve issues arising from these two types of contingent incident that will impact our financial commitment? Either we will need to introduce substantial modification to the terms, or it will even be practically impossible or even unreasonable to perform. Like the example I've given you of a conference to be held in September, while the earliest time you can supply the conference materials will be in the month of October. Subsection 1 of that section says, for example, if custom duties or taxes, when you enter into a contract, you are aware that, oh, there are some duties and taxes that are payable by a party to the contract, for example, but the law changes, and the law now requires that same party to pay higher amount of taxes or levies or duties. What will be the consequence here? This one, it is not impossible for you to go ahead and perform the contract, your own part of the contract, but with substantial modification. It will actually affect your level of profitability. When you go ahead, you pay higher taxes than what you actually envisaged when you entered into contract. According to AAOIFI standard, this one, whoever the law that introduces the new tax puts an obligation of paying on to will have to bear it. And that cannot be transferred on the other party, because the other party has not defaulted, has not done anything that warrants him being punished in a way. So AAOIFI standard says it clearly, the new obligation by virtue of that law that introduces a new tax or levy will actually be borne by the party that has a duty to do it under the contract. So that's an example. Another example given by the same standard, when you look at, we look at subsection 3 of that section 4 of the standard 36, it says prevention of importation of goods to be delivered. That's a good example. Like you have entered into a contract to supply a particular item, which is subsequently declared as being illegal for importation into that country. It becomes illegal for you to do. Sharia will never allow you or encourage you to do an illegality. No. So what will happen in such a circumstance? Our office says the actual harm or injury caused to the client or the institution in this case will be removed by resorting to reconciliation or to arbitration or even to adjudication through a law court. So in such a circumstance, because clearly here, a law has made it impossible for you to perform the contract in line with the terms of the contract as agreed upon by both parties. But you can have a way out through having it referred to an arbitral panel, a panel of arbitrators. And that is why it is usually recommended that when you enter into a contract, including Islamic financial contract, you add a clause, arbitration clause, that will say in any event of dispute, because no doubt a dispute is going to arise from such a case. Who will pay? Sorry, it's not a matter of paying now. That, it's not even if I want to supply it, except if I want to indulge in illegality, and I'm not prepared to do an illegality. So what will be the compensation for the two parties? How are the two parties going to be discharged from their obligations? How the standard is advising that the best option in doing that is to take the course of arbitration or the course of reconciliation, or if that one fails, then there is no harm in the two parties resorting to Sharia court, where one is available, or even to a conventional court, where they will surrender themselves to the court, and for courts to judge, for the court to adjudicate based on the contract that is between them. And the contract is essentially a Sharia contract. So the contract will be taken, the court will take account of that one. And this happens, we've seen examples of it in different parts of the world, because parties are bound by their terms of contract. So this is a way, or the three ways suggested by AAOIFI standard. And this is generally what AAOIFI has suggested in relation to any dispute that arises from a contingent incident that has impacted the financial obligation of parties, where it is impossible or it would be unreasonable for parties to proceed and perform the contract as conceived originally. That is number one. The other type, as we said, is when the contingent incident will lead to termination of the contract, that the contract will come to an end. The contract will actually come to an end. Let's see one of the examples given here. Okay, that is the example I cited a short while ago, the example of conference materials that will not arrive until after the conference itself must have ended. So what does AAOIFI recognize in such a situation? Okay, this is a very good example. It gives an example under subsection 4 of 5 of that standard by saying when the emergence of an incidental excuse in ijara means the contract of lease. When you entered into ijara contract, it may be a lease of an asset. It may even be a lease of a building, a factory, a house, a residential building, for example. All what he's saying here, let me give you practically. You know, there's something we call al-ijara al-muntahiya bit-tamlik. that is a lease that is a contract that begins with lease, but will ultimately end with ownership of the leased asset. And that is why it is usually called lease to own contract. Al-Ijar al-Muntahiya bi at-Tamlik. This is usually done by people who cannot afford to build a house of their own using their own resources. They may enter into such a contract with an Islamic bank that will be co-owners, but gradually the bank doesn't have any interest in perpetually owning a house. So it will gradually transfer its own stake in ownership to the other party. And that is why the customer of a bank will start as a lessee, but you will eventually end as the owner of the property. But let us look at one way that a contingent incident may impact financial commitment. You have entered into this, moved into the house. You moved into the house as a lessee, as I said. But when you look at most of this contract, the rent that is payable, they have taken account of the fact that you are not an ordinary lessee. You know, an apartment that will ordinarily go for 200,000 naira per month, for example, or 2 million naira per year. In a lease to own contract, they will have taken account of the fact that you are eventually ultimately becoming the owner. So rather than just charging the normal market rate, as far as rent is concerned, they will raise that value, the rent payable. Instead of paying 200,000, you may be asked to pay 500,000, 600,000. And you know that that is also in your interest, because the earlier you get out of the contract, the better for you to become the owner of the house or whatever property that is being leased. So customer will happily agree to that one. But let's say along the line, the plan is for you to lease, to be a lessee for 5 years before you become the owner of the house. At the end of the 3rd year, maybe there is a fire incident in the area, and the whole house was burnt completely to ashes. So, and with no fault from you as the customer, you have no fault in causing the fire that actually engulfed and burnt out the entire property. Now, the justice that Sharia always promotes demands that we reassess the situation, because you have been paying, you know, automatically. This is a kind of example that the performance of the contract becomes impossible. There is no house. How can you lease a house that is no more in existence? So there's no way you can continue to collect rent from him. So this is an instance of a contract coming to an end as a result of a contingent incident that was never contemplated when the contract was actually signed. Now, what will happen here is that we will now go back, and this is the resolution of all Islamic banks authorities all over the world, that we will now go back and revisit the contract. We will now look at the market rate, the normal rent that should have been paid by the customer if he were to be a lessee, an ordinary lessee that has not entered into a lease to own contract. Let me go back to the earlier example I gave, that, for example, it was the rate was 200,000, but because of the lease to own agreement between us, we jacked it up to 500,000. The fatwa, the resolution today, is that the bank will have to go back to the normal rent, which is 200,000, and will have to refund the customer that has no fault in frustrating the contract. He shouldn't bear the brunt of what he has not contributed to in any way. So whatever is an excess in the amount payable and the amount that has been paid as rent, paid because he was expecting to become the ultimate owner. So it's partly the ownership price plus the rent. So the two of them have been merged originally, and they agreed to that one. But because the ownership is no more possible, then you go back to what he has enjoyed, of the facility while he remains the true lessee. He's no more an owner. He's not a potential owner any longer. Then you will deduct that 200,000, that is the normal rate, and refund that party the 300,000 that he has been paying in excess with the intention of becoming an owner. So that is a way of resolving it when it becomes impossible for the contract. The contract has been frustrated, it's impossible. The performance becomes impossible. Physically now, practically it becomes impossible. It's not legally, no law has made it illegal for it to be performed, but practically because the subject matter itself is no more in existence. And that is, I want to say something here. Some people that will say, oh, we don't see any difference between the product of Islamic banks and the product of conventional banks. When you say you have lease to own, yes, conventional banks also do lease to own, but I want to assure you, no conventional bank will introduce this element of going back to the normal rate of the rent payable. Once you are paid, you are paid. Once you are paid in any conventional bank, I can say this authoritatively from my little experience in the industry. It's only in the Islamic banking product that you can have a solution like this when you have a contingent incident that impacted the financial obligations of parties to an ijara contract. Dr. Habib, I think we will have to stop here as far as analyzing and explaining the content of Standard 36 of AAOIFI, because you wanted me to also look into the devaluation in the currency, especially as it happened to us in Nigeria and continues to happen. May Almighty Allah, let's see an end to this in the nearest future so that all of us can enjoy the fruit of our labor. People are earning today, but the purchasing power of what they earn is on a daily basis. It's been lost to the rate that we have that is increasingly and continuously appreciating or depreciating. So that will take me to now looking precisely into just is just a case under the general issue of contingent incident that may impact financial commitment. If you have an obligation to pay in Naira, for example, like a year ago, you bought a car and the arrangement for you is to pay after a year or two. But you knew what was the rate by then, and the rate is not similar to what we have today. It can happen to either of the two parties, because people always think that it is only the party that has an obligation to pay that will benefit from a contingent incident. No, we are talking of appreciation of a value of a particular currency. It's also possible. Depreciation is also, it's not an impossibility for the value of a currency to depreciate. So Sharia will take a holistic look at the two cases, whether it appreciates or depreciates. What is important for us here is to note that the commitment that you had at the initial stage of entering into that contract has actually changed drastically. So what will happen? This particular issue is a very sensitive one. It's one of the most complex ones, contemporary issues that we face, particularly in Islamic financial contract. To the extent that for 3 different sessions, the highest body, the highest iftar body in the world today is the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, has deliberated on this particular issue 3 times in 3 different sessions. The first time it came up was in the 5th session that was held, I think, in Kuwait. Let me check the date here. I have all the resolutions here. The first time they had to deal with such an issue was in 1988, in December 1988. Yes, in that year, they held their conference, their meetings in Kuwait. They deliberated on this issue of inflation that leads to substantial loss in the value of currency of obligation. When parties have entered into an agreement using a particular currency to measure their commitment or their obligation, but because of inflation that is very high, hyperinflation, the value depreciated substantially. So they deliberate on it in that one. Subsequently, I'm saying this so that you know that it is a very complex matter. At the ninth session, in the ninth session, which was in 1996, they also went back to the same issue. This same issue was also deliberated on when the jurists from all over the world, they are the members of the International Islamic Academy. They went back to the issue in April 1995. And not only that, even subsequently at the 12th conference, which was held in year 2000, they also had a course of going back to this same issue. So it's a very complex matter. And you know where the complexity is arising from? It's because we want to do justice to both parties. Originally, the default rule in Sharia is that it is only what you owe that you must pay. Originally, the default rule in Sharia is that if you owe 10,000 naira, under no circumstance must you have a duty of paying more than 10,000 naira, whatever happens. That is the default rule. But the question here is that Sharia says you pay exactly the exact amount, and this is what we call al-mithil, a similar amount to what you have got in any contract that you have an obligation to repay. Now, some jurists, that is why they repeatedly had to go over and over this issue more than once, because it is the argument of some jurists, notable jurists, that we do not look at the exact amount only in form, but you must equally look at the exact amount in substance. Not only in form, 10,000, 10,000. They argue that this is similarity in form. But we have to look beyond that by looking at the similarity in the substance of the amount of money that is being paid. 10,000 naira in year, let's say 2023, or let's take a bigger figure so that we can be realistic. Let's take $1 million naira, for example. $1 million naira in year 2020, beginning of year 2023, maybe was not more than $800, for example. Or it should be more than that. Anyway, just by way of giving examples, whatever the amount, what you will take $1 million naira to buy of dollar, for example, you will need more than that. You need more than that. You need okay, let's be realistic. Who can tell us what was the rate in January 2023? Approximately. Can anyone give us the picture of the exchange rates then? Or if anyone can just Google online. One of you can just Google online and tell us. January 2023. Okay. If you want to buy $1,000 with naira, how much did you need then to purchase $1,000? $1,000 then.
460 naira by that time.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a very good example. 460 naira. So that means to buy $1,000, you need how much? You needed how much to buy $1,000?
That's 460,000 naira.
Good. You needed 460,000 to buy $1,000. Now, today in July 2024, you are not buying $1,001. You want to buy also $1,000. How much do you need to buy that today?
That one is 1,540 naira. 1,540 naira.
That means $1,000 today will cost you 1.5 million. or thereabout. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now look at the difference.
Yeah.
Now
Yes,
look
sir.
at the difference. 460,000 buying $1 a year ago, and to buying $1,000. I beg your pardon. To buy the same amount of dollar today, you will need. Someone said 1 million today is 645. No, we are not talking of 1 million, $1,000. Please get us right. We are talking of $1,000. Yeah. You need 1.5 million naira today to buy just $1,000 that you will have had by just paying 460,000 naira in 2023 January. So this is what this class of jurists are saying, that you may be looking at 460,000 naira in January 2023 to be similar in form to 460,000 naira in July 2024, but they are not similar in substance. That is their own argument, that in substance they are actually different. That we are saying, as per the Sharia rule, that you can only give whatever you owe. He owed 460,000 naira then, but it was an equivalent of $1,000. Today he has to pay not 460,000 naira that will be similar in form, but must also be similar in substance, like paying 1.5 million naira. So that is the argument by some jurists, notable jurists, like I said. But majority of jurists, vast majority of Muslim jurists do not agree with this line of arguments. Their view up to today is that if you had an obligation of paying 460,000 in 2023, what is also payable today must not be more than 460,000 naira. And that makes a lot of sense from the Sharia perspective. You know, according to one of the jurists, notable jurists of Islam, when he was explaining this in one of the sessions, one of the 3 sessions that I mentioned for you of International Islamic Fiqh Academy, he said if he should allow this one to take place, then there will be no ground. No ground will remain for us to declare riba haram. Because it's the same argument that people will put forward to legalize taking and paying or charging interest. That, oh, when I gave you my money, this was the value. So you want me to take that same value? No, I won't take that one. This is what they call opportunity cost or opportunity loss or time value of money, or, and so on and so forth. Just to justify the fact that I want to look at what will be the real value of my money given to you a year or 2 or 3 ago. And this will actually defeat the whole essence of prohibition of riba in Islam. Another factor that will let us realize that what the majority of jurists are saying is the one that is in line with the Sharia provisions. You know, when you said 460,000, we agree with you. 460,000 last year is not the same as 460,000 now. It's 1.5 million now. But don't forget that we have a golden principle of financial contracts, for financial transactions in Islam. It's a golden principle. Al-gunmu bil-gurmi wal-kharaju bi-ad-daman. That is, meaning that liability begets reward. Liability begets reward. And revenue follows damage. Al-gunmu bil-gurmi wal-kharaju bi-ad-daman. Meaning that you can only lay claim to any reward or any profit or any dividend where you are equally liable should there be any amount of loss. That's a golden principle of Sharia that regulates all the financial transactions that we engage in without any exception. You are only allowed to claim profit where you are also liable to suffer an amount of loss if the same transaction should have ended in loss, not in profit. Now, let's come back to the example of 460,000 naira. The 460,000 naira that you gave to that man a year ago, assuming that He did not even benefit from it. The 460,000 was stolen completely from him. Who will bear the brunt? Who will bear the liability? You bear nothing. You will bear nothing. You will bear nothing. In fact, he cannot come to you to say, look, madam, the money that you gave me, do you know that it was stolen completely? Or there was a fire incident that took away everything got burnt? Nobody will listen to such stories. This is what Sharia is telling you. It's only when, because you are looking at the profit that will come from the 460,000 that will entitle you to taking 1.5 million. But you have ignored the fact that you are not going to be liable. Should that 460,000 depreciate to become 100,000 or even lost completely, like the case of theft or stealing that I gave an example of. So this is the second factor relied upon by the vast majority of Muslim jurists to say that, look, whatever the circumstance may be, is only what you owe that you pay. The third factor is that we know that there are two key elements of prohibition in the Sharia contract, financial contract. Two elements of prohibition that wherever you find the two of them, or you find any of them, no contract shall be valid. The first one is riba, and we are through with that one. The second one is al-gharar, excessive uncertainty. They said there is no way we can avoid al-gharar when we allow people to start linking the amount of obligation that people have to pay to the current value of the currency, whether it depreciates or appreciates. It will amount to excessive gharar. For example, now, when I took 460,000 naira, I want to assure you that no Nigerian could tell you then that today we shall be exchanging $1 for 1,500. Nobody knew. So they said, if you enter into a contract and you are not even sure of what will be your obligation, what kind of a contract is that one? Sharia will never allow a contract that encapsulates or that allows and contains excessive amounts of gharar. And there is excessive gharar in such a situation that you enter into a contract today, you do not know what will be your obligation in the next 6 months, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. So it's an excessive gharar. And as I told you, these two key elements of prohibition, whenever they coexist in a contract, or even when we have one of the two, that contract can never be valid from the Sharia perspective. So this is the summary of the position and interestingly, the International Islamic Academy maintained in its resolution, scholars will argue and present papers, but at the end of the day, there must be a resolution coming out of each sitting, each session of their conferences. Interestingly, they maintained throughout the 3 sessions, that of the 1988, I said, that of the 1995, and that of 2000. They maintained that position of saying no to linking or tying debt obligation or financial commitment to the appreciation or depreciation in the value, because of the 3 factors that I mentioned for you. The factor of riba is there. The factor of gharar is also there. The factor of violating the golden principle of Islamic financial contract, which says that it's only when you are liable to loss that you have the right of claiming an amount of profit. This is the summary of what we have in our resolutions. But I have I have something to add here. I think we need to look beyond what we have read, either in our AAOIFI standards and what we have also got from the International Islamic Academy's resolutions. We agree totally. That is the default rule in Sharia, and it must be maintained. Otherwise, we will be legalizing riba from a back door. And that is why scholars, jurists maintain that position. That if you allow this, there is no point of telling anybody that riba is haram again, because they will put forward the same arguments to legalize what has been declared as prohibited by Sharia. But there are instances that I believe that If they were to be presented even to the scholars at AAOIFI, they will have a different opinion, because we have several precedents that we can rely on in Sharia. The first one that comes to my mind is the issue of when someone deliberately delayed payment of debt or discharge of a financial obligation or commitment. For instance, 460,000 as loan, but because he was aware by December 2023 that, the rate is now 800 instead of 460, said, let me wait a little bit. And the debt was due by December, for example, but deliberately he delayed payment till July now, when the value has risen to become 1.5 million. So if he's to pay $1,000 now, either way, he stands to benefit somehow. That is what I'm trying to put forward as an example. Where the rise in the value that will be to the disadvantage of the creditor was deliberately occasioned and caused and affected by the debtor, then we must have a change in fatwa. Why do I say that? Because we have a precedent in Sharia that says if anybody should usurp al-ghas, take illegally a property that belongs to another, and he has a duty of returning it, that is what Sharia says, by way of restitution. But he delayed it, and until a day that he is comfortable, he now say, come and take your property. It's in the fiqh literature that we will look into the property, the value of that property, the way he seized it illegally. If the value is the same today, then he can return the same value without any increment. But if there should be a difference in value of what you seized illegally, you took away by force from the legitimate owner and deprived him or her of the right to benefit from his legitimately owned property, then scholars said, jurists unanimously said, you will have to pay for that value as a way of punishing you for illegitimately and illegally seizing another man's property. So if you look at this one, al-ghasb, then we can apply qiyas here. In my opinion, and the opinion of many other contemporary jurists, that there is no big difference between al-mumathala, deliberate delay in discharging a duty that will become detrimental, disadvantageous to the other party. There's no more difference between that one and seizing what belongs to another by force, illegitimately. The same way we look at the value of it. If the rise in value is caused by you, by your deliberate refusal to pay, to discharge the obligation that is on you. For example, let me come back to that example I gave you. The rise that occurred between January to December 2023, that one will go with the general rule that we have explained before. But the debt was due in December, but because you are emphasizing further fall or rise that will be to your advantage, then between December and July today, you will have to account for the difference in value, because you had a duty to discharge in December and you have the wherewithal, you have the resources to do that, but you deliberately delayed, you deferred, just to harm the other party, your creditor or the seller or the lessor or whatever. Then you will have to make up for the difference in that value. I think this should be one of the exceptions that can probably be introduced maybe when the Muslim jurists have an opportunity of revisiting. I know this will be revisited sometimes in future. I believe this should be one of, because we have precedent that are unanimously agreed upon among jurists. And I see clearly similarity between the two cases, the case of ghasb and the case of deliberate refusal to pay when it is due, when the payment is due and you refuse to pay deliberately with a view to harming, to causing injury to the other party. And this can also, we can also take a clue from what we have in the provision of a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Prophet said, "Matlul ghaniyi dhulmun, layyil wajidi dhulmun, yuhillu uqubatahu." That if anybody has the resources to pay an obligation, to fulfill a financial commitment, but for whatever reason he refuses to pay, that one alone, the Prophet described it as an act of injustice that may subject the unjust party to a punishment. So even we look at it from that way, we can regard punishing him to pay the difference in value, just as scholars in the past will punish whoever has seized another man's property illegally. And whenever it's returning, they look at the value then and the value now. I think when we put all this together, that should qualify as an exception to the position held by the vast majority of Muslim juries all over the world, as I said. I think we are fast moving to the end of the program. And Dr. Habib has listed so many items that he would love me to touch in the course of my discussion of this important matter. So let me move to one that I think, if you are able to take that one, I think it will be expected from you that, okay, what is the way out? What are the Sharia-approved hedging mechanisms? Sharia does not say if you have a way of hedging whatever that will amount to loss for you, can you plan ahead so that such a loss will be averted in a way? That is what we call hedging in financial terms. Is there any way of hedging this issue of contingent incident impacting our financial commitment? The answer is yes. And the number of those mechanisms has been mentioned even in the International Islamic Academy resolution. They mentioned about 3 possible ways of hedging against loss that may occur as a result of contingent incident that could impact financial commitment, particularly if it has to do with the value of currency appreciating or depreciating. The first option is for you to give whatever you are giving out, whatever contract you are entering into, look at a more stable currency. If you know that your currency is not stable. So one way of hedging against such possible loss is to use a more stable currency. That even in an event of any change in the value between the time of your entering into the contract and the time of performing the contract, they will be minimal. So that's a way of hedging that is acceptable to Sharia. For example, now you can choose to use Riyal of Saudi Arabia, Dirham of the United Arab Emirates, United States US dollar. I'm saying this because, as I always tell people, I lived in Saudi Arabia for almost 20 years. And throughout those 20 years, the exchange rate of dollar to Riyal has consistently been between 3.75 and 3.77 until today. Since 1989 that I first came in contact with Saudi currencies, the Riyal has always been stable. So you can say, okay, we are entering into obligation now. So let's take a more stable currency to determine our obligation, what is payable in future. That's allowed. But in so doing, it is not allowed for you to pay in Naira and just mention value that, for example, 1.5 million Naira. But whenever you are paying me, you will pay $1,000. Why? Because the equivalent of 1,500,000 today is $1,000. That is not what they are saying. What they are saying is that you have to convert your 1.5 million into dollar. Give him $1,000, then he has a duty to pay you back $1,000 whenever whenever the debt or the loan contract matures in future. Number 2, as part of the hedging mechanisms mentioned in AAOIFI, not AAOIFI standard this time around, in the resolutions of International Islamic Academy. They said you can even use gold. You can use your money to buy gold and pay in gold or silver. So these are also especially gold, is relatively stable, unlike the fiat currencies. You know, I need to point out something here that some of you might have read in the fatwas or verdicts or resolution of past jurists. They mentioned in the fiqh literature that you must take what you must take whatever you have given in terms of debt obligation and nothing more or less. Even if the currency has no more value. So we need to understand this one clearly. If a currency has completely lost its value, no scholar of repute will say you still have to take it, even if it has no value. But the reason why they said what they said then was the fact that what they were using, they were not in the category of what we have today as fiat money. Naira, dollar, real, dirham, they are all fiat money. Fiat money means they don't have value on their own. They are just ordinary papers. Only that they are backed and supported by full faith and credit of the issuing authority. For example, a naira, 1,000 naira in Nigeria today, it would have been an ordinary paper. But because it is supported, okay, there was an interruption. Are we back? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, so the example I was giving, in order for us not to misinterpret what we may read in the fatwas of the past jurists, they mentioned it that you have to take what you have given, even if it has lost value. The reason why they said that was that in those days, they were not using fiat money that has no value. There must be a value. They were using coins, for example, or gold or silver. Even if an authority says we are no more accepting this as a legal tender, for example, they are not more using it as a legal tender. That's a value that has been lost. It has lost its value of being a legal tender, but gold will continue to have a value on its own, intrinsic value. Silver shall continue to have an intrinsic value, and the same thing applies to other. Currencies that were being used, that fatwa that we may read in the fiqh literature. So Assalamu alaikum. So we are back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. You can even use goods or assets. That's a way of hedging against the loss that may occur in an event of a contingent incident that may impact your obligation. For example, someone comes to you to say, I need money to buy a vehicle. You can ask him, what model of vehicle? Let me buy that vehicle, and that vehicle will be the obligation you have towards me. So anytime you are returning, you are paying me back, a Toyota of so model will be the one that you go and buy in the market, and I will go and sell it at the same rate. So I won't lose any amount of money. That's also a way suggested by the resolution of Islamic Fiqh Academy. So these three are the ones suggested. But I will add another one that has been introduced by some other contemporary Muslim jurists. Notably, we have Dr. Sami Suwailim. Dr. Sami Suwailim today is the head of the research and academic wing of the Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah. That is the biggest development bank, Islamic development bank in the world. And maybe the biggest Islamic bank altogether, because it's a bank that is owned by countries, not by individuals. Nigeria is a member. Saudi Arabia has the biggest share. Nigeria also has a substantial share in the shares of IDB. So Dr. Sami Suwailim has the research and academic wing of the Islamic Development Bank Group. He has an idea that he introduced some years back by way of hedging against devaluation or depreciation in value of currencies that are being used in contract. And that is what he called as-salamu bi-sayri suq yawm at-taslim. It can be translated as value-based salam. Value-based salam. You know, when we talk of salam, salam means a forward contract that you can pay today, but the delivery of the product will take place in future. For example, you know the market rate of a bag of rice in Nigeria today. Let's put it at 80,000 naira. 80,000 naira is the bag of rice. But you can approach a farmer that is just going to farm and will harvest in the next 6 months, 1 year. That, okay, let's strike a deal. What if I pay 70,000 naira per bag or 60,000 naira per bag? And I will give you the money instantly. You go and use it for farming, for producing. But instead of paying 80,000 naira, that is the market price, I will pay 60,000 naira. That is allowed in Sharia. That is what we call salam. So he will get the money in advance. He has obligation of giving you the product after a while. But what Dr. Sami Suwillim is introducing is that because you may also be subjected to this issue of obligation being impacted by the contingent incident. You know, the price then will determine 80,000 today. What if it has become 100,000 naira by then? Or that it has depreciated to become 40,000, which we pray to have in Nigeria. We pray that the price will come down, will go back to where it was 2-3 years ago, that inshallah in Nigeria, we will buy rice, a bag of rice, 50 kg with 10,000, 20,000 naira, inshallah. That's our hope, that's our prayer. So if it happens, then the same issue will arise of obligations being impacted by contingent incidents. So he now introduced what he called value-based salam. That we will agree today that, okay, you will give me so kilograms that is sold at so amount. Let's say 80,000 naira today, and I'm paying 800,000 naira. That will give me how many bags? 10 bags. Yeah. By the time you are giving me 10 bags, I'm not taking 10 bags in the next 1 year, but I will take the exact number of bags that 900,000 or 800,000 will buy on the day of delivery. And that is what he called value-based salam. It's still been debated. Not so many jurists have agreed with him, but at least it's a way. It's one of the mechanisms that we have on the table that we can consider when we are talking of ways of hedging against the possible loss, when we have an obligation that could be possibly impacted through no fault of ours, but by occurrence of any contingent incident, examples of which we have given in the past 1.5 years. So at this point, I will also again thank the organizer for giving us this opportunity. And I think we have only 6 minutes left. I don't know whether there will be room for question and answer, but whatever may be the case, I thank all of you for participating and for listening. And more importantly, we thank Dr. Habib for giving us this opportunity to interact and learn from one another. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's a great pleasure and opportunity for us to have you in this session. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you abundantly. As Sheikh has just said, we are having less than 5 minutes to close the session because it's a 1.5 hour session. So personally, I have just a question or a clarification. We may not be able to take any questions or, clarification from our dear participants because the time is well spent and we may be logged out anytime soon. But the question I'm trying to raise here, as regards what Sheikh discussed when he was discussing Al-Ghasbu and Al-Mumatala, and he was trying to see the chaos of making Al-Matulu, someone that is postponing payment of his debt, trying to make it analogous to al-ghasb, which they both have the illah of dhulm. So the question now is that if this illah of dhulm is established for the one who postpones his debt, and in the Murabaha transactions, we learned that the bank is allowed to take a penalty in Murabaha transactions, but is not allowed to benefit from that punishment, from that penalty. So if it is allowed that for the cost of Gasbu, which can also happen to the bank that has sold out a particular product on Murabaha basis, why is it not allowed then to benefit from this from this penalty?
In Murabaha related contract.
Yes, now
okay.
I want to between these two things.
Okay, if you are able to answer just this question, I think it suffices. It's a question that will be of importance to all, because almost everybody has one or two things to do with Muraba when dealing with banks. Yes, the difference between the two lies in the fact that Al-Mumatola is about a debt obligation. Al-Muraba is coming as a result of a sale contract that has resulted in a debt obligation. There is a difference between you have taken a loan. They are specifically talking about a loan that the debtor is deliberately deferring payment because he wants to harm the creditor. But in the case of Murabaha, why it is not allowed for you to charge to benefit from the penalty is that will amount to changing the price or the cost, the sale price of a commodity. You have already sold your Murabaha and you have added your markup that suits your whatever you planned. You said in 10,000 naira and I'm selling at 12,000 naira. If you allow you to say because you have deferred, you have delayed in payment, then it becomes 13,000 naira. That means you are changing the cost price, the sale price, and that will amount to riba, another backdoor to riba, because it's as if we are saying, oh, this is what is due now, but because you are not paying me now, it's a matter of option. You will pay me later, but I will add something as a penalty to that one. And that is why it is the position of jurists all over the world today that, look, in the same vein, the hadith that we use to justify whoever deliberately refuses to pay when the debt is due, that matlul ghaniyi zulmu, that this is an injustice. So an injustice, you can be punished for injustice, but does it necessarily amount to benefit to the creditor? He said no, especially when it relates to Murabaha that originally stems from a sale contract. And you cannot have double prices for what you have sold. What you have sold, you have sold. You cannot increase the price again. And that is why it is different from even Ijara, that you can have a fluctuating prices or charges when you have different terms of Ijara or lease. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it answers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elongate your lifestyle on spreading the beneficial knowledge for all the ummah.
And you too to continue to benefit the ummah as you have been doing.
I continue to ask question, please, Prof.
Sorry. So inshallah, the session is going like we are going to share the recorded YouTube live streaming after the class, inshallah, so that we can benefit from it. Jazakumullah khairan shaykhana, barakallahu fi umurikum.
So thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi
wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan.